earlier on, you talked about some of the challenges facing the implementation of wealth taxes,
Yes.
issues to do with compliance, the political aspect of it, the enforcement and all that. So what will Kenya need to do differently in terms of, the enforcement to address issues like illicit financial flows and hidden offshore wealth and accounts?
Absolutely. So the question of enforcement, especially of wealth taxes, is a difficult one that as Kenyans would really want to have that conversation about it, because on one end we do not want to seem as if we are imposing a tax. KRA changed its name to KRS, so from authority to service, meaning that they don't want to seem as if they are imputing a certain burden on the citizens, and that's the same thing with regards to our wealth tax. So matters to do with enforcement have to come from that particular direction, or that is the motive or idea that should actually carry the question of wealth taxation. When you look at countries from the global north who have access to certain technical infrastructure that is completely advanced on matters to do with wealth taxation, they also implement some aspects of voluntary wealth taxation and also aspects of ensuring that they counter check that particular data through third-party sources. Now, in this regard, when you think about it from the aspect of Kenya Revenue Service, what would need to happen is that they would need to have this enforcement machinery in such a way that in as much as we will have voluntary declaration where I will come in and say, I am Daniel Murakaru, I am worth 300 million Kenyan shillings in terms of my assets, then the Kenya Revenue Service will then be able to actually verify the same in terms of counter checking and seeing whether indeed my assets amount to the value that I am talking about. And this will require a lot of interconnected and unified data systems. Currently in Kenya, we have very fragmented data systems. For instance, when you think about trying to understand whether Marianne owns a property, you'd have to go to the lands registry. If you want to know whether Marianne is a shareholder in a company, you'd have to go to the company's registry. If you'd want to know whether Marianne is a SACCO member, you'll have to go to one of the cooperative societies. So we do not have a unified system where we can be able to actually check and see that one person owns this property. So if we would have that unified system, then it would be very easy in terms of wealth registration and having a wealth data system that then the Kenya Revenue Service can use as the basis for then coming ahead or going ahead and taxing the wealthy. So establishing that particular infrastructure is costly because it would not only need some aspects in terms of people verifying that data, but also the valuation systems by themselves. The Kenya Revenue Service would then be able to go ahead and do the valuation. So for instance, if it's on matters to do with land, they would have to keep on looking at what is the value of your land in that particular context. And when you look at it, I know we have also talked about property taxes from the on-source revenue perspectives, and we've always addressed the issues about valuation roles at the county levels, which has also been a very big challenge in terms of ensuring enforcement for the county land rates that are paid at the county level. So if that is a challenge that we are having, then introducing a wealth tax would then especially a net wealth tax would then result to a fail in this regard, because you would not have established an enforcement capacity where even if we know that you indeed are supposed to pay the wealth, we can actually verify that you own that property and this is the value of that property. So unless we have those mechanisms in terms of a unified data systems and machinery to enable us to value those particular tax systems, then we will not be in a good place in terms of wealth taxation. Then there's also the aspect of third-party source data. So when we talk about third-party source data, this is data that is coming from banks and from other parties whereby the wealthy people put in their assets. So when you think about this particular conversation, then it brings in the question of data protection, such that the wealthy people would need to feel confident that even if they're putting their money within a certain bank, how that particular data is going to be handled between them and the Kenya Revenue Service is going to be in a manner that promotes or adheres to the Data Protection Act guidelines and safeguards. So in that particular regard, those are some of the enforcement measures that we can think about in terms of what Kenya can do as it readies itself for a wealth tax. But in as much as this sounds very difficult. Various countries in Africa, such as Rwanda, such as Uganda, they have taken various approaches, and I think also Kenya, we had taken a similar approach in terms of having the high net worth individuals unit, whereby we tend to use softer mechanisms such as educating the wealthy about taxation, giving them certain tax incentives so that they also, come from it from a voluntary perspective. You see, if they come from it from a voluntary perspective, it will be very easy for us to be able to hold them to account. But again, at the other end of the day, taxation is considered as a necessary evil, and we need not rely on, the voluntariness or the kindness of individuals, and therefore there would be the need to ensure that we have those mechanisms to verify and to accurately ensure that the wealthy people do not evade or avoid tax.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think, just thinking about all those challenges, and it's just on enforcement alone.
Yes.
It just goes to reinforce what you had talked about earlier, that this is indeed a complex
Yes, it's a complex process, yeah.
But I think what even makes it worse is that taxation is very political.
Oh, yes.
And wealth taxation even more, because, you talked about these people who are wealthy, they also hold a lot of power. So how do you overcome the resistance and build public support for wealth taxation? Given the political aspect of it and the influence and the power that these people hold.
So the question of structural power and instrumental power is something that we actually converse a lot within our paper, and we actually trace it way back in Kenya's history, and it's something that has always been there within the taxation conversations, even from the time taxation was evolved. For instance, just to quote the Holy Book, that is the Bible, when Jesus Christ was doing his work here on earth, and an innocent person just came. I don't know whether he was innocent, but let me just say he was innocent. Just came and said, if you look at this coin, what should we pay? Should we pay to Caesar, or should we just give it as an offering? And he said, pay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So from that particular context, taxation was always political. And even to date, it has always been a political issue and a political matter. And when you think about it from the angle of wealth tax, because the wealthy individuals can be able to control policy. When you look at it from the instrumental and the structural power in this case, the instrumental power is whereby they can be able to go ahead and, influence policies. So for instance, the people whom you elect, day in, day out, you do hear their net worth being declared over the 129 million bracket, which you would say. And you can imagine those are the same people whom we are targeting on matters to do with wealth tax. Do you think they would pass the same? Well, tentatively. Again, when you think also about the instrumental power perspective, is whereby the wealthy also, because they hold a lot in terms of the economy, they can decide to restructure their companies or take their investments outside the country. So in that particular regard, then it gives them a very high negotiating power in terms of the taxes that can be introduced, especially when we're thinking or talking about wealth taxation. However, in this other regard, the reason as to why even in our paper or even the conversation is, spreading conversation about wealth taxation and doing a lot of advocacy is because the individuals or the common wananchi, the 42.5 million of us, we have a lot of power in terms of our voice and in terms of what we are recommending, because again, we can be able to come together and actually say that a wealth tax would enable us to redistribute the wealth inequality. And remember the image that I began with in terms of this conversation, where we have a very bourgeoisie society and one that is not bourgeoisie. And I think that's a reality that we're also seeing, especially in very many global south countries. So if we can come together and actually champion for wealth taxation, that taxation should really target the people who have the means to pay, and not just the means in terms of them being enabled, by a salary, but them being enabled by the wealth and the infrastructure the wealth and the property that they have, then in this particular context, you would be able to move this particular conversation. Because again, the resultant effect is that they will be contributing to the tax basket, which they are not contributing effectively. Then once they contribute to it, then we'll be able to fund the socioeconomic rights and the socioeconomic realities that we have. Therefore, for each and every citizen that is listening to us through this call, the wealth taxation is, yes, for the wealthy, but it's up to us to ensure that it's implemented, that it's enforced, so that at the end of the day, the real burden can move from the middle class and the ones who are salaried to the people who now own more compared to what we have. And I think everyone would really, really appreciate that particular deal in this particular context, because again, we'd get to save more and perhaps even get into that wealthy bracket where we will become wealthy individuals and, be also contributors to the wealth taxation. Yeah.